Tank12, however you call me, I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks. This time around, it is going to be a quite long video, so bear with me. We're going to be talking about a topic that I have been thinking about for a very long time, and that has been one of the most annoying features in World of Tanks for me over the last couple of years. Now, I'm talking about the Japanese heavy tank line. Today's video, we're going to be breaking it down, looking at the vehicles and looking at the problem that the Japanese heavy tank line has introduced into the game, and then we're going to be looking at the future, and we're going to be looking at how it will develop from here on out. So first off, we're going to be looking at a gameplay in my Oho, the tier 8 Japanese heavy tank, and then we're going to be jumping into some files that I've been researching, some websites to figure out, because it's actually the 2-year anniversary where they actually changed the Japanese heavy tanks for quite a lot, especially the tier 9 and the tier 10 counterparts. So we're playing the Oho. The Oho comes equipped with it has 3 different guns that you can use. One of them is the tier 7 howitzer gun that I'm currently using on it right now. One of them is a 10 centimeter more competitive kind of gun, better rate of fire, but still not the best option. And since I am playing the Japanese heavy tank line, I wanted to see some high explosive action for myself. So if we talk about Japanese heavy tanks, I think we can say that there are pros and cons for basically all the vehicles. First of all, they're slow, they're sluggish, they're large, they're not very well angled, and their armor is basically very flat. But they have a lot of armor, yes, and they have high explosive based guns. Now, that is a combination that in World of Tanks you don't see very often. The combination that you will see in World of Tanks with vehicles that have high explosive based guns is more on the side of big gun, not good armor. If we take a look at that, if we look at the British tank destroyers, the FV4005, if we look at the KB2, these vehicles are not supposed to have crazy amounts of armor because they can do a lot of damage with their high explosive shells or HESH shells. So we already have the first dilemma with these vehicles. The Japanese heavy tanks, basically, they turned the entire formula upside down. The reason why I think this is one of the worst lines that Wargaming have ever released into the game is because when they released the Japanese heavy tanks, they were nothing special. I'm not sure when they released it. It must have been like 3 or 4 years now. But when they released it, they were heavy, they were large, they were sluggish. The tier 6 and the tier 7 and the tier 5, they did have the high explosive based guns. And if they were a lower tier, most of the time the armor that they had would not hold up. But the difference is if they were top tier, the entire thing would change around, because obviously when you're top tier and you have 120 millimeters of armor at tier 5, it is going to be quite difficult, even if your armor is not angled. And that's exactly what ended up happening. You had either very bad games when you were not top tier, or you had very good games when you were top tier. And in the end, you had like a mix of medium, like either very good games or very bad games, because the vehicle was just not competitive enough at higher tiers and was just, too strong at lower tiers. So that is a typical problem that kind of happened with the Japanese heavy tanks, that you didn't really get good games unless you were playing as the top tier player. So what ended up happening was that Wargaming thought, since the Type 5 and the Type 4 weren't really that enjoyable to be played, and they weren't very favorable, people decided to not unlock these vehicles. And what Wargaming thought was they don't have any special trait that does make them different from other super heavy vehicles. For example, from the mouse. Both of them have very good armor, right? Yes. But the mouse obviously has great armor, 128mm gun, which is fairly competitive, and it is very sluggish, and it has a lot of HP. So the Japanese heavy tank line didn't really give us a motivation to try and go for the tier 9 and the tier 10 versions, because they didn't have any special trait that people would be interested in. If you already owned a E100, a IS-4, IS-7, a mouse, you basically already had super heavy tanks, and you didn't need any more Japanese super heavies, because they were basically the same, just a bit more boxy and with basically the same kind of armor composition of a mouse. So what ended up happening in 2017 was Wargaming decided to overhaul the entire tech tree. They buffed the tier 5 and tier 6 Japanese heavy tanks, and they basically broke the game for a bit when they introduced the 15cm high explosive based gun on the Type 4 and Type 5 heavy. That is one gun that both the tier 9 and the tier 10 can use, and they basically have ruined the Japanese heavy tech tree, or basically they've ruined balance, in my eyes, of tier 10 and tier 9 matchmaking. What ended up happening was that people were now able to use a vehicle at top tier, because it's always top tier as a tier 10 vehicle, with a 15cm gun that you didn't have to aim, that you didn't need to know the weak spots of the enemy vehicles with, and you just fired high explosive shells at their face while bouncing simultaneously shots fired at you from their side, because you had so much armor. So obviously a problem did come right with that, and people started to notice, people started to grind the line, and now you have hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, that's maybe an over exaggeration, but now you have a lot of Type 5 and Type 4 owners who have been running the vehicles with the very special 15cm gun, and they didn't need to focus on weak spots, they didn't need to focus on their armor, on their angling. They basically just drove right in there, used premium high explosive shells, and bashed your fucking face up, while you had to resort to premium shells to be able to penetrate the vehicle at first. Now that is the biggest problem that we had to face. So I'd say, without further ado, let's take a look at all the changes that they've made, and some polls that have actually managed to find where people did express their opinion on this tech tree. And then we're going to be talking about the future of this tech tree, because it is going to be quite interesting to see where they will end up. So talking about the problem that is the 15cm gun that they have added into the game, since we're talking about the Type 4 and the Type 5 now, you can see right here in the patch notes of 9.17.1, that is a patch that's been released 2 years ago, I think somewhere in February 2017. And what you can see right here, this is the important thing. What they did was they added the 15cm gun for both the Type 4 and the Type 5, and they actually did increase the armor thickness of the Type 5 and the Type 4 in certain areas. The hull and turret for the Type 4 and the gun mantlet for the Type 5. Now this is where the problem starts to begin. Now before they added the 15cm 41st year type gun on both the Type 4 and the Type 5, both of them were running with a 14cm AP based gun. It wasn't very much liked. People weren't fans of the tank line because it didn't provide anything special. If you had other super heavy vehicles, they were not very interesting. They had a lot of armor, yes, certainly, but the gun wasn't as exciting as other guns were, and obviously people were not really interested in playing a vehicle that didn't have any special feature. So Wargaming came up with the brilliant idea: why don't we just add a huge ass high explosive firing gun? This is very important. This 15 centimeter gun has the alpha damage of 1100 with standard high explosive shells. But with premium shells, it does 1400 alpha damage. Now, obviously, you can think for yourself who is going to be using what kind of ammo. People will be using the premium ammo because it does 300 damage more than the standard high explosive shells. What ended up happening was these vehicles were very strongly armored, and all of a sudden got a very powerful high explosive base gun, and they were able to sit in front of you, damage you, while you were not able to penetrate them. And what ended up happening was people started piling up behind friendly vehicles to not get shot by the high explosive based guns, and to fire at them from the cover of the allied tank in front of you. So yeah, the first couple of weeks when they introduced this type of gun was a blast. No, it was definitely not. So moving on over what ended up happening. Yeah, before we get to this right here, let's take a look at a poll. This was posted on July the 1st, 2017. So a couple of months where people were able to play the Type 5 Heavy and the Type 4 Heavy with the new gun. And that new gun and those vehicles were topic of discussion right here. So this poll was, I'm not even sure, 108 people did cast their votes, but it's not too many, but we'll see very important information right here, and it basically does align with my way of thinking. So what ended up happening? The derp gun, the 15 centimeter gun that they added, what do people want? The first option was remove it, and it had gotten the majority of the votes, 51.85%. But there were still a couple of people, almost 20%, that wanted to keep it and change it. Now, I think those will probably be the players who own the tank and who own the gun. So why would you want to change it if you have it? Because it's very powerful. And yeah, but another feature that was quite interesting to see was keep it but remove the 1400 alpha, and that is basically what is going to be happening in the future. In the future, they're going to be cutting the premium shell down to 750 alpha damage, and that is a substantial nerf. Almost half of the damage is going to be falling off, basically a half, just 50 HP more, and that is going to be a huge nerf. That is going to open the question now, is the Type 5 and the Type 4, will they still be the well-liked vehicles as they are right now with a lot of people who are playing them? Or what will happen? Will they fall down the entire pipe again, and people will not want to play them again because they're broken, and all of a sudden they've been nerfed and they are no longer as powerful as they were before? What will end up happening? So this is one of the reasons why this line is such a broken piece of shit, because it's so unbalanced, right? Then they were talking about the AP gun, and you can see quite a few people were right here talking about the problems of the 14 centimeter gun. And right here, the votes are a little bit different. It's a bit more over the place. You can see underperforming, it needs major buffs. It's slightly underperforming, it needs some minor buffs, or even 30 people almost said it is fine. So yeah, you have quite a few different opinions right here, but I think most of the people want to see the 14 centimeter gun buffed a little bit and the 15 centimeter gun nerfed. What do they want buffed on the gun? The penetration, as you can see right here, that is most famous or most liked. And on the other hand, it doesn't need any buff. So yeah, the people aren't sure what they want. They have different opinions, and you can see right here, some think that it is actually okay, and something that it doesn't need to be buffed, definitely. So the Type 4 and the Type 5, both of them very interesting to see. The Type 4 most people think that it's not overpowered, but it's broken and needs to be reworked. But on the Type 5, you can see that most people think it is overpowered and broken, and it definitely needs to be reworked and nerfed. So yeah, it does align with my thoughts, and you can see that most of the people think that the Type 4 and the Type 5 need to be more balanced. This is a poll that they created on the 1st of July 2017. What ended up happening was this right here. Vehicle rebalances in update 9.20. That is just 26 days after they made that poll. So this is all not very important. This is where we get to the important stuff. So the OI experimental and the OI both got buffed substantially in their armor. Now the OI experimental wasn't very powerful because it didn't have a lot of armor at the front. Even at tier 5, people were able to go through it, so I can understand why they did buff the vehicle a little bit. But the OI, on the other hand, didn't really need that much of a buff on the back of the vehicle. It's kind of weird, and I think it doesn't really suit the vehicle still to this date. So what ended up happening was they nerfed 2 positions on the Type 4 and the Type 5 Heavy. They didn't touch the guns, no, but what they did end up doing is that they nerfed 2 very small ports on the Type 4 and on the Type 5. Instead of having 260 millimeters of armor on the Type 4, you now had 240 and 250, and instead of having like 280 on the Type 5, you had 260 and 270. Now, obviously, what ended up happening is that's not a huge nerf, and people started to spam these motherfuckers with gold ammo, and I am one of those people as well. When I see a Type 5 or a Type 4 Heavy running around the corner, I start loading premium shells. Why do I do that? It is out of principle. It is one of the dumbest lines that they have introduced into the game, and I just cannot fathom how Wargaming thought this was a good idea. Now, the future of this vehicle, especially the Type 5, is going to be quite interesting to see. When they're going to be nerfing the premium shells, especially the 1400 alpha damage that you have with the premium high explosive shell to 750, we're going to be seeing the Type 5 and the Type 4 in a new light. Are they still going to be as competitive as they are right now? Probably not. Are they going to be going down the same line as they were before they had the 15 centimeter gun? Maybe. But the thing right now is that anyone can play a Type 5. It doesn't, it just, the worst thing is any idiot can play this tank, and they don't need to know anything about armor. They don't need to know anything about angling. They don't need to know anything about penetration. They don't need to know anything about weak spots. And that is the biggest problem that I see with this tank line. People are very quickly rewarded by just aiming at a tank and shooting wherever the fuck they want with premium shells or with high explosive shells and sit out in the open because they have so much fucking armor that they can just basically protect themselves forever as long as they have the front face towards the enemy. So it's the dumbest, the most basic tank design, and it's the dumbest and most basic idea to have this vehicle line in the game. But it's in the game, and it's not going to be it's not going to be completely reworked. Yes, it's not going to be taken out of the game, but I hope it gets nerfed to the point where people just don't like the vehicles anymore because they're total trash. And this is horrible. I absolutely dislike this line. I don't understand. I'm not sure where they've gotten the blueprints from, because Japan, as an island state, what the hell were they supposed to do with vehicles such as the Type 4 Heavy and the Type 5 Heavy, which both weighed like something along the lines of 180 tons? So yeah, basically what I'm seeing in the future is they're going to nerf these vehicles, and we're going to be seeing who's still going to be sticking around to play them, And if the people who yeah, the people who own these vehicles will probably not be happy, because all of a sudden the vehicles will be nerfed quite substantially, and they're going to be looking at Wargaming with their basically with their mind and saying, "Hey guys, we paid for those tanks. Now you nerf them into shit." And yeah, I just can't see a winner. I think the best thing they could have done back in the days before they introduced this heavy tank line was to just not release it and just scrap the idea completely. But that's just my thought. I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.